Zana, hi. We're really,
Hi,
really
how are
good. How are
you?
you?
I'm well, thank you. It is a
It
great,
is.
beautiful
So
Monday,
we are
and it is
so,
great to
so
join you.
excited about having you chat to us. I started stalking your profile when you popped up on one of my feeds, and I was like, who is this amazing person who is doing the Lord's work? Because we all know how, how scary it can be to have that courageous conversation of
100%.
negotiating one's salary. So we're really excited that you can make it. But before we get into how Mentorship Monday works and all the questions we have for you, just tell us a little bit about where you are, who you are, and why did you decide that this is the niche that you're going to play in?
Good question, great question. So hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning into this live. My name is Zana Matutu, and in 2021, I became the salary coach. A little bit about myself, I started my life in professional services in the technology industry. And the one thing I learned in the professional services arena is whatever a company says goes. No one really knows what's going on the back end. When you're a professional services company, it's just what's on the marketing material, it's what's in an email, and it's what's coming out of someone's mouth, but there's nothing physical to touch, right? So in working there, I joined the staffing industry, and being in the staffing industry, immediately, I was not a recruiter. I was taking on a position of interviewing candidates and talking with hiring managers a lot and finding new businesses that needed staffing support. And I started realizing there's a huge gap between what employers are looking for and what candidates talk about when they're in interviews with them. So because of that disconnect, it's almost an employer saying,
Yeah.
let me figure out how I can pay them the least. And the candidate's like, how can I get the most, but doesn't know how to get up there. So I like to say that there are more jobs available than people think there are. And sometimes it's really helping the world see where your value is to make that connection bigger and better, right? But the one thing I should say that hit me the most in becoming a salary coach is I realized, given every bias against an individual or every judgment that could possibly hit a person, what you look like, how tall you are, whether you're skinny or fat, there's a way to play to other characteristics to make up for the bias against you. And I started to say, holy crap. When I started studying the data on LinkedIn, I created 8 profiles of different people: white young, white old, male, female, Asian, Black American, Black African. And I realized, okay, there's a ranking system. Here in America, we have a class system and a caste system. And now, given where you fall into this, there's a way to strategically get to where you want to be. And in seeing that, I worked with a few friends. One of my friends, she got out of jail. So she has a felony on her record. She's someone who I said, but there's so many jobs open. Immediately when I talked to her, I said, well, so what if you have something on your record that an employer looks for? So she was trying to get cleaning jobs in America. She couldn't get cleaning jobs. She couldn't eat. She would try to work at a temporary staffing company for 1 week, was not able to get a job. And I said, I could just introduce you to my guy, Bill, right? Just some random, white guy in New Jersey, but I know he was looking for recruiters. And I said, we made the connection happen. He never ran her background check, but in communicating with the two of them, we got her into a recruiting manager position. That was, and it happened a few years ago. And then I said, okay, what can I do with this next person I'm working with? You have a job gap in your resume, but you have these skills. What can we do with you? And I realized, wait a second, there's something forming here where I'm actually really good at helping people find jobs at a very fast rate. So then I created a course, and the course, if you get through the entire thing, you can't not have a job. Like if you do everything right, because it's just, you're covering your bases, you're getting your name out there to the world, you're super visible, and you're starting to understand the things that you need to tap into from yourself to share that you are that person for the employer. Like I guess there's a little tiny niche in the market, kind of like I was talking with someone else recently where they said, hey, there are a lot of people in this industry of staffing or talking about employment or HR, but there aren't too many people who talk about the nuances, the fine-tuned nuances of salary negotiation.
That is absolutely, of course, I understand that you're in the US. I'm sitting in South Africa, at the tip of the African continent. A lot of the people on this live are actually from all over the world. So I'd love it when you guys say hi.
Okay.
Just let us know where you're from. A lot of you are waving. Maybe let Zana know where you're from. And and I'm putting on a South African perspective, and I'm like, sure, I mean, your services and your insights are gold here in a market that's tough in terms of finding a job. And so what tends to happen in a market where the, you know, unemployment is so high is that people really don't negotiate, because you just go in with such deep gratitude that you just even have a job in this economy. And we want to unpack some of that psychological stuff as well that we need to, you know, sort of leave behind, because I think we're walking into those conversations with a lot of fear, and we end up not doing some of the things that you're going to share with us. So as you might see, Zana, we've got hellos from Botswana, Namibia, Mozambique, South Africa, the US, Philly, a lot of people shouting out saying, you know, hi and where they are from. So I really appreciate that we've got a global expert, guys, here today. The way it works, Zana, is so with Mentorship Mondays, we understand that there isn't not a single person who could mentor everybody in the world. So what we do is that we use this tech platform to get the best experts in the world around some of the biggest mentorship conversations that we need. And one of those is this very conversation that we have. And so what the community has done, this global community, is that they've sent through questions to me. And in a way, they've said, Zana's not for you. She's for us. Please send us, please ask the questions we're sending, not your own questions. And so I'm going to try and do that to the best of my ability and not to keep it to myself, because there are just so many. And I know we just have about 40 minutes left. So there's a question from Nomzi. Nomzi says, and I'm just reading it off my laptop, saying, how do you negotiate your salary offer before arriving to the end stage without losing the offer? And, you know, I think the underlying question here is the underlying fear of, if I negotiate on the offer, I'm upping the possibility and the risk that they're going to go for somebody else who's cheaper. So how do I find the middle ground between, I think I deserve more, but jeepers, I definitely do not want to lose this opportunity as well? What would be your advice?
That makes sense. Just to clarify, is this person already working in the company where they're looking to negotiate their salary, or are they a brand new candidate? Okay. Okay. It is tricky. It is tricky negotiating, because on the end of an employer, it's, hey, if this person speaks up at all about this pay, there's a chance that they would quit if we brought them on board now. 6 months later, they're the ones most likely to quit if the pay doesn't work within the range that they're looking for. So on the candidate side, when discussing pay, I think the more data the candidate provides of why they think they deserve XYZ pay, the more you're giving the person on the other side a chance to say, although we see this information, this is why we're paying you this rate. And if they're not able to justify what that rate is or why then the discussion has to come more towards the rate that other person is looking for. But most likely, if that employer says, hey, we don't have the budget for this, you know, we can only pay you $10 an hour, and if we were to go 1 hour over, then we have to fire somebody else. We actually don't have, you know, that just means number one, you're not talking to the right person. On one end, you're just not, you know, I'll use, here in America, I'll use a big store, Walmart, that people can work at. Right now, anybody can go and apply for a job at Walmart, and there's a chance that you will be hired, right? But all of their people coming in, no matter what state you work in, no matter what city, you're going to get paid a flat rate. Like, you are here to stock the shelves and, you know, help assist customers from aisle to aisle. So if all you do is this for your job, there's almost, you know, how you get above a rate that's fixed and stays like this, you now have to say, hey, above and beyond what these responsibilities are, here's what else I provide to this organization. But I don't want to go off topic from what this person was saying, but, you know, the way that we're really, good way to look at it is, and let me figure out, there was something that I want to say. I look at something as 5 pillars of negotiating one's salary. And so one way that I see is you have to prepare and plan. Preparation and planning is gathering your data, making sure you know what you've been up to the last few months and what it's done to contribute to the organization or to an organization. Defining the ground rules. So once I step onto, you know, this employment site, what am I supposed to be doing that's giving me the pay that I'm getting? You know, you want to clarify everything. You want to justify, you know, make sure that you're understanding that. Then you're bargaining and you're problem solving. Hey, if we can't come to this exact rate, what can we do to get us closer so that both of us feel a little bit happier here? And the last part is closure and implementation. So I'm going to take one step back a little bit farther and say that that can, you know, that overall high level message could be used for someone who's a brand new candidate or someone who works internally in a company. But for an external candidate, the biggest way that you can throw it to someone who is looking to say, hey, we want to pay you this, but you're looking for this, is to say, hey, but this is what I just did for this past employer. Here's a past project, and here's how I did this. And then you have the references to show for it. And at the end of the day, you know, companies don't want to be left out of what's helping them grow and thrive and do better. So it's really now coming to the positioning of what are you doing to make a company more money? No matter what your job role is, you also have to you're taking some part in helping that CEO become a bigger CEO. And if you don't know how you fit into making that CEO a bigger CEO, you have no leg to stand on. You have no leg to stand on. It doesn't matter if you're a web developer. It doesn't matter if you can fly a spaceship to NASA, you know, or, you know, to the moon. You have to understand that here I am in the work, you know, whether it's coming from my brain, whether it's coming from my strength, whether it's coming from my looks, something has to be being used to help this company make money.
Yeah,
and now you dive
into that. So I've heard a couple of things. One of those is have your data in place, have your story straight, chronologically, factually. What I'm also hearing is this beautiful 5 pillars that you've shared with us. These are some of the things you want to think about. But what stands out for me, Zana, is the emphasis on these are the past projects I've delivered on. What we tend to do in the South African context specifically is that instead of talking about past projects, we put on our CVs, these were the past responsibilities. But the fact, responsibility versus this is what I actually delivered, I'm just hearing a very different narrative and a very different conversation. And that's really exciting to hear, because I've not even heard that myself, to say, focus on what that you've delivered and accomplished rather than what was expected of you in the last role. Is that sounding like what you were conveying in that moment?
110%. And there are a couple of, actually in South Africa and Zimbabwe, there are a couple of tech people I was working with where they were interviewing with USA hiring managers. And I had to literally change their whole mindset. We had to have literally weekly meetings and discussions about, hey guys, it's, you know, here in America, it's not just cutthroat of here are your skills on a sheet of paper and they're just going to accept you based on this. It's, you know, here's the personalities that have to match of you fitting the team and someone wanting to come into work and work with you, you know, these little nuances. But the other side of it is, it's not just, you know, I don't want to see anything on your resume that I could look up on Google, because then it's not you. I don't want to see any sentence on your resume that I could see on Google, because you're either, you know what I mean, or you're copying off of someone else, or it's a lie, right? So, you know, so what you just said about duties, I've definitely come across a lot of people in other places where it's just, even here in America, it's, you know, get rid of the duties, guys. Talk about what you really did, you know, and it starts to help people see, wait a second. So now the next question is, what would happen if I wasn't here? If I just stopped working, they never hired anyone else, like, let's just watch this office do well, right? If everyone is doing well and you can sit like this in your office, you don't have much to, you know, you don't have much of a leg to stand on. But the other side of it is, oh my goodness, like things could fall apart, or this deliverable isn't going to be reached, or hey, this customer won't get, we're going to lose a customer. If money is lost because you're sitting like this for 2 weeks, now you have a leg to stand.
So there's a question from Uratilwe. Ura, I'm sure that's what Uratilwe is probably called for short. Ura's asking the very same question, Zana, but in the inverse, and saying, how do you negotiate within the same company to make a move internally upwards? So how do you renegotiate your salary if you're already already hired in that company? And then Ura's also asking, and also she says, but Nozi, also, how do I know in the first instance that what I am getting paid is actually fair?
Okay. To answer the question, I'll answer the first one first. So when you're inside of a company and you want to make more money, you have only two, you know, there are only two directions you can take your salary negotiation. It's either, hey, I've been here for X number of years, and because of the cost of living in the world, I need more money. Or because of my tenure here, I deserve more money. So it's not because you're doing better work. It's not because you're a bigger, better person. It's just standards-wise, I've been here, I've been consistent. Can I just at least keep up with society, right? So those are people who deserve the 3%, 4%, 5% raises. They're, and really no employers are now coming, at least in America, are coming to the understanding that, okay, sure, we have to kind of keep with the trends of what society is offering. So now on the bigger side of, I was here and now my pay needs to go up by $20,000, or, here's this leap that needs to be taken. What a person is now looking to show is, number one, data. They have to, well, first have a meeting with your manager and say, hey, with someone with my job title in this organization, I was hired, what was I hired to do? Come in and do, just walk me through what makes me the perfect, the type of person that's going to receive stellar reviews at the end of this quarter. And then once you know that framework, you can go and say, you go back, you might think and dissect it, just process it. On one end, you're either currently exceeding it, you're under it, or you're at the average level. So if you're exceeding it now, jump into the conversation of a discussion of, where you're now clarifying and just, saying, so you're clarifying, so this is really what I'm doing, right? And so you're saying that me coming in at 8 is the thing I should be doing, clarifying and justifying happens for people who, oh shoot, here I'm looking. So here you have your underperformers, your average people, and your above average people. All of them potentially deserve that 3 to 5% raise every year. You're right? So the people who deserve the full-blown raise should be the people who are exceeding whatever that original job option was. So now for those people exceeding, boom, the data will show the facts. For these people here, you might need to spend 3 months becoming that person who deserves a raise. So I think that is, in terms of preparing for that raise, it's now that you know the framework of of what you need to exceed to be better than that pay rate, boom, do it, and do it consistently. Make sure that you have now people seeing you, kind of like eyes on the work that you're putting forth. I would tell people dress better in the months before you're asking for a pay raise. In terms of the professionalism, if people wear, khakis and polos, maybe it's time for you to just wear the more formal business suit. Occasionally bring in the tie, because people who at a higher level dress better. We don't know why, we don't know, and then people get to the super high rich level where you just don't care at this point, right? You bring, quite a bit of money, it's cool. So, but it's tricky where you could come, if you're already working for a company, you can come so stacked with all the data of the world that you deserve more money. But at the end of the day, you said yes to that low pay. So, right. So when you come now to say that you want something else, you do have to be willing to say, hey, this is not going to be the company that makes me happy if this rate now stays the same. But at least being internal to a company, you don't have as much fear of, I'll lose my job if I ask this question. It is okay to go in and ask the question. If an employer says no, depending on the size of an organization, it's just through one ear out the other, and they don't even think of it again, right? And then you might have the smaller company of, hey, we know Cindy's unhappy, and we have to figure out what we're, whether we let them go eventually or we work something out for them eventually. And I think people also need to take in mind that there are other things to negotiate beyond the pay you get at the end of the week or at the end of the month. So if, someone's working for a nonprofit organization, they just don't have the donations coming in that would support that higher pay, it's either you find a way to bring the company more money, and then you tie it into your job role and you say, hey, this should make it worthwhile that I get paid more. And then, or the other route of it is you take what I don't want to lose my train of thought. We're thinking about something else.
You negotiate your benefits rather than the actual income?
Yes, and it can, because a lot of benefits are still monetary. And they have some level of value to them that is monetary. So now you're looking at, with smaller companies, it's much easier to do, but you can say, hey, and you can only do it in some job positions. If you're in finance and accounting, you might have a leg to stand on for this. If you're in sales, you might be able to do this. If you're at technology, high level, on the developer side, you might be able to do this, but where you can literally say, hey, can I have XYZ percentage of this company as we're growing it, because this is where where I see my value. But when I work with people, to really see, once someone really sees their value or understands how much they should be paid, you really get into a space of becoming a contractor almost, because you're saying, hey, I can do this for IBM, I can do this for Alibaba, I can go do this for this other company. And now it's really other people who could potentially be vying for your time and your space, you know, time to work with. But I do have to go back to that average employee. It's okay to be an average employee sometimes. It sometimes is going to come to how you present yourself for whether an employer is going to say yes to that raise.
So
some people
I'm sorry to interject. You know. I'm just like, oh my goodness, I'm going to get in so much trouble because there's so many questions. I do want to just say to anybody who's just joined, I'm seeing my brother Farai has just joined us and a couple of other people. Just, we're talking about how we're talking with a salary coach, and she's giving us skills and insights in terms of how to negotiate a better salary. And we're looking at whether your journey is new coming into a company or whether you're already within a company. I do want to get to the counter offer. So if you've been approached by another company and they're offering you more money, what do you do with that? And do you go back to your company and get a counter offer? What are some of those things that you've got to navigate to get through? There was a bit of reaction to the comment, Azana, you made about dressing better a couple of months before. I completely get it. And I mean, I actually super buy into it. I did see one of my friends, Candice, who I think is in Spain, if I'm not mistaken, saying, no, this is very old school thinking. We don't need to get dressed better. And somebody else was saying, in South Africa, you get penalized for dressing better. And I'm like, where do you work? I don't know where this member of our community works from. But I do think it's an interesting thing that we're having a different reaction to this idea that how you look actually gets psychologically tied to what you're worth. And I completely buy into that. And I do also agree that there is a certain level within the organization where what you wear actually doesn't matter anymore, because you've earned your stripes and everybody kind of knows that you're worth it now. But while you're still negotiating your worth, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but I'm just going to say, guys, 100% support that statement. Really think about how you're showing up and what message it's communicating about what should be on your income statement in terms of their salary. So I don't know in the US if you have this, but I'm sure you do, Zana. Masishi is asking a question to say, Zana, please can you explain what a sign-on bonus is? And can I negotiate a sign-on bonus during salary negotiations? So it's that little incentive that they'd give you before you actually join.
Right, 100%. So sign-on bonuses are really big here in America with Fortune, I'd say 30% of Fortune 500 companies, actually more than that. But I'd say 30% of Fortune 1000 companies and a couple of small companies. The technology industry does it. And it happens a lot for, actually, they even do it for some sales jobs and recruiting jobs. So it's not necessarily the job title someone holds for getting the sign-on bonus. But what an employer is saying is, hey, we see you as a talented person. We probably found your resume on LinkedIn, or we found your resume or CV on, we have websites like Monster, Indeed, Career Builder, but basically someone's reaching out to them to say, hey, we need your skill set in our company. And because we really need your skill set, and we know that wherever you're coming from, it's an inconvenience to make a change. Acknowledging it's an inconvenience to make a change, they're now going to say, hey, we'll offer you this sum of money. It's either, you know, whether if you have to relocate, it's sometimes more. It could be $10,000 or $20,000. If it's just to say, hey, in good faith, we really are offering you this job. Like, you're not going to just quit your other job. We say you're about to join, and then we say, oh, sorry, things changed. We had a meeting. You know, we're telling you sign-on bonus. So it makes a lot of candidates onboard faster, and it makes some candidates say, hey, we'll choose this company over this one because they're putting in an investment before.
Okay, fabulous. And do you think it's a good idea to negotiate your sign-on bonus? Or do you take what they give you? Or do you look at it and say, well, you're asking me to relocate. The cost of living in the city that you asked me to relocate to is probably so much higher. Just the move is going to cost me so much more. So actually, I would like a little bit more.
Yes, it's really, and it's a delicate discussion, but it's also, if you bring back the facts of everything you just said, of, you know, hey, the cost of living in the city is a bit higher. The cost of gas is going up. I actually have, you know, now I'm going to have to put my child into a different type of daycare that costs a little bit more, but I love this opportunity and I really would be dedicated to this organization. Could we see if this can work? You know, can you talk with your team and see how this could work? And then, you know, it's definitely one where if someone has more than one offer on the table, someone offering a sign-on bonus, it would be very strategic of someone to ask for a sign-on bonus from all of the companies and just see what happens. Because, you know, and sometimes you have to remember who you're talking to, because on one end, if you're talking to someone who is talent acquisition or recruiter or in a, you know, certain position in a company, it's just a discussion with another human. They just want to fill the, you know, they just want to get the position filled too. And they'll give you their honest feedback of, I've never heard of anyone ask for this. Or they'll say, hey, I'll go back to my team. You know, Ted handles that, or, you know, right. And we'll be able to work things that way. I have not had the experience. Actually, I've not had the experience of someone asking for a sign-on bonus and having nothing to stand on, like a sign-on bonus where a why comes in of just, who are you? You know, out of all these candidates we've interviewed, like, why would we give this to you over someone else? I haven't found that to be successful, but I have found the ones of, you know, higher cost of living, relocation. My skill is so great that you need me. You know, this is an inconvenience to my life, definitely.
So one of the things that I'm hearing is, I think you need to give us a script, because as I'm listening to your use of language, as you go into that space, you say, hey, you know, can you go and check with your team and see where we can meet each other? And I'm not sure. You know, sometimes we just lack the words. You know, how do I put this in a way that, you know, communicates my confidence, but also communicates my commitment? And the fact that I actually am ignited by the opportunity, but also that is not going to be enough just to get me walking through the door if you're not going to offer me something that makes sense. Nolu T says, in my organization, you can negotiate your bonus, but you need evidence. You can't just, I think just ask. So I've never heard of negotiating your bonus. So I want to come back to that, because I think that's really interesting. Nolitana, please let us, or maybe you won't tell us where you work, but that's interesting. I do want to ask you, Zana, about the counter offer first. So I've been happy in my role, and all of a sudden a recruiter gives me a ring and says, hey, we think we would, you know, love to have you in our company instead, and puts an offer in front of me with a sign-on bonus or not, whatever the case may be. And what is your advice? Do I go? Or do I go back to my manager and say, this is how much they're offering me? Do you want to counter offer me? And what are the repercussions? How does the relationship change on the basis of that?
Right. Having the feeling of, if you have a fear of losing the job that you have, the confidence in the negotiation is definitely weakened. So fear creates a weaker negotiation, because of course there's something you're trying to hold on to and you don't want to say anything out of step. But sometimes a salary negotiation is a dump of reality of, you know, coming to terms of someone is right. You know, either the person who is sitting at the back who's been paying you that rate all the time, either they're paying you the right rate, or you're on the other side and you're right, you deserve more. So you have to be willing to, ultimately, if you're currently at a company, you're making $50,000 a year, another company is offering you $60,000 a year, you have to be willing to leave that company at $50,000 if they're not willing to go up to the 60. But the way you approach them is to do the same thing of preparing the evidence, preparing the data that you've been performing well, or at least consistently in the role position that you have. You may bring in the external data of, here's how the cost of XYZ is going, the cost of milk and gas, and this is going up, you know, so let's keep to trends. And the other side could be, hey, I also heard that this person and this person table, they all got raises, so I want to be a part of it. You know, there are definitely data pieces to stand on. The most significant one of the counter offer is, hey, there's another company ABC is offering me this. And now the employer's like, wait, so we might lose you to this? You know, what are those rates? And now they might look into this data that you're feeding them of. However, I go back to saying, know who it is you're talking to. Because if your manager does not handle a budget or truly have any say over how much money you make, you could talk till your ears fall off. You could be the next I don't know, Elon Musk of some situation, and you're talking to the wrong person in the company. You know, you could be in a big company where you just don't realize it. So, yeah, you know, ask the person you're talking to, hey, how much, you know, how much say-so do you have in how much money people make here? Yeah, I'd love to be here for forever, but do you think in this position I could get up to $200,000 a year? Of course, most positions, no, you can't get up to $200,000 a year. But in having that discussion, someone's going to tell you, man, you know, most people tap out at, you know, $30 an hour because for this reason, or yeah, but at least you'll get a little bit more understanding of the world that you sit in. So be bold enough to ask questions, but when it comes to showing all the data, it still comes back to a human of you can still get enough.
I want to talk about this idea
you know,
that was raised about negotiating your bonus, but before I get there, I want to just share a quick reflection on what you've just shared. And this is, you know, having a conversation with your manager and saying, hey, by the way, you know, how much say do you have, and in you know, how much people get paid in this team. And I keep going back to human nature and the likelihood that the manager goes, so now you want to earn my salary? You know, now you want,
okay.
Yeah, you want to earn what I earn?
Right. You always remember the psychology of humans. You always, if someone's in a higher position, praise them for being in a higher position. Praise them as if you'll never reach their position, but you would love for them to bestow the knowledge that they have onto you, the lowly person. Oh, I never would imagine it, but wow, if I could just dream to be somewhere like close to you, that's just so, you know, and you're just getting into this thing of, but people are willing to talk. And it's, you know, and sometimes you almost have to put yourself into the position of being an intern or someone who's the coffee grabber to get the most information you need to make moves for yourself. So it's like you almost make yourself bigger to be that smaller, to be that bigger person in the end. But because sometimes you have to feed to the egos of other people. I would say here in America, like in the manufacturing industry, you have some employers that might feel that way. Like, why would I help boost you up so you can take my job? And it's like,
no,
that shouldn't
I mean,
be
that's
the feeling.
100%. You know, when I think about it, it goes back to just the basics of how do you influence people, and you influence them, right?
Exactly.
By just speaking them up, and at the end of the day, you're getting the information that you need. So, Zana, negotiating your bonus. I have never heard of it. I'm so sorry. I've missed the person who raised it now. I'm not sure if it was Abigail or somebody else who's been quite active tonight. But typically in South Africa, and again, I'm going to use the context that I know. Typically in South Africa, your bonus is going to be based on a performance review at some point in the financial year. And based on how you've scored, you're then, you know, given a performance bonus. And it's an ongoing conversation, I would imagine, with your manager about how you're doing throughout the year. And it's, I mean, I don't want to get into this, but it's probably the reason why I work for myself and I don't work for anybody else. I hate the idea that somebody's going to tell me how I've done my job and then decide what my bonus is going to be. But let's assume that that's the space that you're in. Can you negotiate your bonus? Can you say, hey, I think I've done better than what you're giving me credit for. Can you give me a little bit more money?
Ooh, that is a good question. I would love to answer it, but I would like to ask phone a few friends who have been in positions to offer this to people and just see what they've experienced and just whether they would do it or not. I don't want to give the answer simply because I've not
let's phone a few friends on the live.
So,
if you are on this live and you are in the HR space and you, even not even in HR space, but you're a manager of people, have you been approached to for a negotiated bonus? Please give us some insight. Does it work? Does it not work? What are the things that we need to look out for? Because I think that would be super interesting to hear from some of the people on the live if they've had that experience. I thought that was really interesting. So we've got about 10 minutes. So I want to squeeze one or two in. There's a question from Fizz, and Fizz I think is on. Fizz is always on. Fizz is saying, well, how does this work in multinationals, where the decision often about how much you earn does not lie with your line manager? And I'm thinking about, I'm not even thinking about multinationals. I'm thinking like of organizations like the UN, where there is very strict bans about very strict remuneration that is for a specific role. It doesn't strike me that that's the kind of organization where you can say, hey, I think, I should be, as a country manager, I should be getting more than the next country manager in the country next door. So do we have to feel our way through the type of organization that we find ourselves in before we start assuming a negotiating posture?
Yes, indeed. Knowing the organization you're in and the structure of the organization, you know, I'll use working for the state government here in America or working for the public education system. All data is free and available to people to see, hey, teachers in year 1 make this, in year 2 you earn this. If you're a government, you know, I'm an officer for this, I earn this. In year 5 I get to here. Unfortunately, with public money, it is what it is. So you're kind of stuck in that world of, you now have to put yourself into a position of becoming a consultant to go above and beyond. So in these, you know, in certain organizations, someone can, you know, I have a buddy named Randy. He's in politics. He could potentially have a position where he's just stuck within a realm of like, hey, senator, if you're senator, you just make this. But because now he has a consulting practice, I'm sort of in this position, but I'm also this other person. So now they're making their 20,000 plus a month that they're looking for, you know, even though, you know, being in the field they want. But that's what I find is, like I gave that Walmart example earlier, is, you know, as much as someone can argue, if all you're doing is bagging, you know, an aisle and doing merchandising, you're stuck in that until you position yourself.
Love it. So there's a response to our call a friend. Somebody picked up the phone. Officially, Mrs. M, I try to pin this, and it's officially Mrs. M says, I'm not in HR, but what I know is normally people know their bonuses after moderation is already approved, so after the review process. So the approval process is finalized at the highest level. It will be too late to negotiate. I think, yeah.
That's what I was thinking. Right. That's why I'm like, I've never heard of it going the other way, of someone being able to negotiate after it's, you know, after the year ends.
For the years that I was in corporate, I'm now sitting here thinking, was I too afraid to negotiate my bonus? Was, you know, did I have the space and the opportunity to go back and say, hey, I actually think it should be, I need a bigger bonus ahead of Christmas. But I think that's a good clarification from Mrs. M's perspective. So there's 2 more questions. There's one question that came through on the live, and I've missed the gentleman who was asking it, but he was saying, what if you get a new qualification while in employ? So let's just say you have a master's degree and you finish your PhD while you're in the job. Is that data enough to say, guys, I'm a doctor now. I think I should be getting paid more, even if your duties are still the same?
On one end, there are some positions where just because you have that new certification or new qualification, you might end up in a new tier. You know, so it does depend on the type of organization you're working for. However, if your duties don't change at all, I have a couple of friends, they're now in positions where they're using their master's degrees, but even though they had their masters and they were working at their past companies, none of their past companies were somehow paying them more money for, you know, for the fact that they completed their degrees, you know. So it's really, you know, comes back to how much more value am I providing to an organization. And one thing I haven't noted is when it comes to negotiation, how rare you are in the marketplace matters to how much you can negotiate. So if everybody over the age of 18 can flip a burger, most likely the people hiring burger flippers are only going to pay you a little, you know, the fraction of amount. It's like, who cares if you don't work out? Who cares if I don't give you bonuses? Yeah. Who cares if you quit in a day? I will find somebody to flip this burger, potentially. But, you know, here in America, we have some positions that have been open for eons. I'll use plumbers, for example. We need plumbers. Plumbers make over $100,000 a year. Nobody wants, you know, tons of people, especially if you're from a city, you don't want to be a plumber. No one wants to actually do work, but, you know, the job exists. So, you know, sometimes we have to decide, you know, what world we, you know, how in depth we want to get into the career that we have. But the biggest way to say, hey, right now, if I feel average, how can I make myself bigger to make more money? And you just bring it back to, how do companies make money? How can I be a part of helping this company make more money? If I can't figure it out for this company, how can I do it for this company? And it's not to say become a salesperson. It's just you have to just refactor what you do to make it a money job. Like, because you are an accountant and you do something more efficiently, you now have the ability, you know, if you do something more efficiently, then something, you now have more time for something else maybe. And that now allows you to use that time for getting more customers, or, you know, whatever the job is, just bring it back to the customers, bring it back to growth, bring it back to sustainability.
100%. So my final question, and for those who've just joined now, we are about to wrap it up. So apologies to you guys who've missed it, but remember that we are going to be putting this up on our YouTube channel, so you can go back and watch it. And we've spent almost an hour, Zana, walking us through how to negotiate a better salary. And listen, if you're stuck and you've missed this conversation, you need to go and listen. So here's my question. We've been talking a lot about the gender pay gap in a lot of the sort of global conversations that I'm a part of. This experience that women are still not getting paid for the same, getting paid the same as men for the same work. Do you find that that is grounds enough for a woman to ask the question during salary negotiation? One, how much are you currently paying for this position? And two, how much are you paying the men in the organization for this? Is there a man in the organization in the same position, and how much are you paying them? Would that be considered a hostile question, or would that be considered something that's important to be asking?
That's so interesting. On one end, I say that's a bold question to ask, and I say go ahead and do it. We're in the times, 2023, where, you know, this is really the talking point. So someone might just, you know, I think it's a discussion point to have. On another end, it's sometimes I think people forget that there is no such thing as pure equality. So the attributes that are potentially holding a woman back in one area are definitely giving women an advantage in another area. I'll give one example. I had someone who, actually I have a couple of positions where I know for a fact I was hired. Well, actually there's one job I know I was hired because I was a person of color, I was a woman, and by the way I looked, I could just tell, I could just feel just the way it was. I didn't even last at that company. It was a really uncomfortable environment. It was 6 weeks probably. And I was just like, I don't see the light at the end of this tunnel. Like, you know, but I think I just talked actually with another person who's a hiring manager. He specified, I only want to hire a woman for this role. I can't have a guy flipping my, like, something, but it was just so interesting that it's like, you know, sometimes things can work in the reverse, but we don't talk about that, because I can say a number of men who explicitly did not get a job because they were men, but are we going to bring that up in conversations? It's not really the hot topic, right? I remember when I was hired for literally because I was a person of color, they wanted to hire a person of color to fire a team that had people of color on there. And I know it was like a legal thing potentially. I almost didn't realize I was way too young to even be in this job role, to be honest. Like it was just a really uncomfortable situation. But, you know, we just have to look at life not being fair. Are we also advocating for the fat person versus the skinny person? Because I think that fat person would have just as much trouble as, let's say, a woman versus a man. But the big thing to remember is with a woman and a man, the biggest difference is that the woman just did not have that boldness and courage to ask for that rate. And I say that because I've worked at 6 companies where I was paid less than my white counterparts, and we were friends. I knew their pay, and I still could not figure out how to ask my employers how I could just get paid with it. But they were just like, just ask. That was literally their feedback to me was, what do you mean? So, you know, so as I got bolder, I realized, wow, women don't ask for as much. So who's to blame? Do you blame so that person, on one end, it's none of their business how much that man gets paid in a role. On another end, feel free to make it your business, but you have to stand on that. Like, if you want to be an advocate for those rights, then continue that in all areas of your life. But, you know, so it's this tricky, you know, path that we're walking up. Be yourself. If it feels right in the conversation and you're an advocate of feminism or other things, feel free, ask. I can imagine employers that I know, they might laugh about it at the end. You know, maybe they'll bring it up, but I don't see that as being
Sure, that's really insightful. I mean, the fact that you bring up the fact that we often miss the advantages, especially in the times that we are in now, especially for women, and I think that's a real eye opener. I know I said final question, but I just remembered something. A friend of mine, who's actually very bold, she is a DE&I specialist based in the UK. and had been a consultant for many years, and had decided that she was now going to go into full-time employment. And when she went into an interview, at the end of the interview, during the salary negotiations, they asked her, what was your pay in your previous job? And I remember that her response was that, I'm not going to tell you that. I don't have to tell you how much I got paid. What I want to get paid is what this job is worth. And so I just wanted to, what is the global trend around having to reveal how much your last pay at your previous job was? Because increasingly we're getting the sense, especially in the South African context, that you are not obliged to disclose that, because it's used as a way of benchmarking what you're worth and not what the job is worth.
Exactly. 100%. I employ people right now, and one thing I'm not asking them is how much they make. I do ask them, they better be available for the hours that I need them, but it's nobody's business. And always on the employer side, I promise you, they are asking to make sure they can pay you as low as possible. And it's like, can I finagle within this range to give you this part of the range instead of this part of the range? So I always tell people, if someone is bold enough to ask you, and they're not in a position for why it would matter, like why would a recruiter or for someone in talent acquisition ask you? Like, just imagine someone, random 30-year-old, just asking you your pay, your past pay. Why would it matter if it was $10 versus $10,000 an hour? I deliver this outcome in my past position. So when I work one-on-one with people, I jokingly tell people, lie. I don't care what you say. It's nobody's business. You know what I mean? If I go to a company and I tell them, hey, I'm a salesperson, rather than you paying me $120,000 a year, my last employer paid me $220,000 a year. The other employer would just say, awesome, well, we'll pay you $120,000 a year. You know, it's, you know, so ultimately I say, if you want to reach for the stars and say you made $1 million an hour, they won't believe it, but also they'll understand that it's ludicrous that it should matter for how they're going
I think
to
that's excellent, Zana. Thank you so much. I think this conversation has been absolutely excellent. Aliyah is just saying, I definitely don't disclose that, especially with private companies. Government salaries are public, unfortunately. Absolutely right, Aliyah. I think you've given us so much to think about. And just the one question I didn't get, I'm going to see if I can sneak it in 30 seconds. Zana, is when an interviewer says to you, what's your number? And I've been asked that.
It's the pre-research. It's the because I've been in a position like that, and I was so startled that I gave the wrong pay. I was so scared that I gave such a low pay because I'm like, keep me at the company. And right after that, I'm like, and my white guy friend said $15,000 more right next to me. And you know what I mean? And I'm like, you've got to be kidding. And they literally gave us the pay we asked for. Like, right? And it's just, so, but look it up in advance. See what I don't think Google is a great source. There's something called Pay Scale. You know, that's a, you know, little thing where you can type in, you know, your years of experience, your job title, and see what, you know, on average based on your location you would be paid. But
data helps.
Yeah,
I think
data helps.
That's probably the biggest takeaway tonight. Hashtag data helps. So whether they're asking you what's your number, or whether they're asking you, you know, why do you think you should get paid more? Zana, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Nomzi, thank you for being on, and thank you for sending a brilliant question, which we started off with tonight. And thank you to everyone who joined from all over the world. Zana's joined us from the US, so we do appreciate that you made time, and we've had so many people from different parts of the continent, from different parts of Europe, all here with us today. So, and it's my first time back since maternity leave, so it's been super special to have this conversation with you, Azana. Abigail saying there's also Glassdoor. So please, if you want to, so Pay Scale, there's also Glassdoor if you want to check what that market-related number is. For now, guys, please have, if you're this side of the world, have a good evening. If you're that side of the world, good morning, and I hope you have a brilliant day. It's been so great coming back and having this conversation. Thank you, Zana. Thank you so much.
Most definitely. Thank you for having me, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.